What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Surfing the Stream. My name is Matt, and I am here to wrap up my Evil Dead review series with the newest entry into the franchise, Evil Dead Burn. So, going into this movie, I had super high expectation. This was probably my most anticipated movie of 2026. After revisiting every Evil Dead movie leading up to this one, I felt like I finally understood what I personally want from this franchise. I love the original. I appreciate what Evil Dead 2 accomplished, even if the comedy wasn't always for me. Army of Darkness definitely was not my thing. And then the 2013 remake and Evil Dead Rise brought the franchise back towards the horror, which is exactly where I think Evil Dead shines. So, where does Evil Dead Burn land in the grand scheme of the entire series? Honestly, this movie felt like it was made specifically for me. I absolutely loved Evil Dead Burn. And the biggest reason is simple. This movie leans harder into the horror than almost any other Evil Dead film. I've seen people online saying this is the goriest, meanest, most brutal, most aggressive, least fun movie of the franchise. And while I understand where those comments are coming from, I also think that they're a little exaggerated. Is it brutal? Yeah. Is it mean? Yeah. Probably more so than the previous Evil Dead movies. But some people are acting like this thing is on another planet compared to every other horror movie that's come before it. If your favorite part of Evil Dead is the horror, I think you're going to have an amazing time. If your favorite part is the camp, the over the top comedy, and those Ash one liners, this might not scratch that same itch for you. Personally, this is exactly what I've been wanting from this series. Now, I know another criticism I've seen is that this movie has no humor whatsoever. I don't agree with that either. There's definitely humor here. It's just a different kind of humor. Instead of making you laugh because everything is so ridiculous, most of the jokes feel intentional. Sometimes they land, sometimes they just feels a little too try hard for me. But I appreciated that they gave this movie its own identity instead of simply trying to recreate Sam Raimi's style. One thing that really surprised me was just how action heavy this movie is. I honestly never expected to say that about an Evil Dead film, and there are multiple extended action sequences that feel larger than anything that we've seen in this franchise before. And because the movie spends so much of its time in one central location, those set pieces become incredibly important to keep you invested in this movie. And thankfully, those action set pieces deliver. And the movie constantly finds new ways to use its environment, and that kept me invested from the beginning to the end. And I think one of the biggest reasons those sequences work so well is the camera work. This might honestly be my favorite camera work of the entire series so far. There are shots throughout this movie that had me sitting there thinking, that was fucking awesome. Like the shot from the trailer where the boat flips and then the camera follows it underwater, or the Deadite dragging someone up a wall while the camera climbs with the Deadite. There are just so many dynamic camera movements that make the action and horror feel more immersive. It feels like the camera is part of that chaos, and I absolutely love that. This franchise has always been known for those disgusting practical effects, and Evil Dead Burn absolutely continues that tradition. There are multiple moments that got genuine reactions out of not just me, but the people that I was with as well. And that's exactly what I want from an Evil Dead movie. Now, the story has never really been the reason that people watch Evil Dead. The original wasn't particularly deep. The remake added a little bit more emotional weight, and then Evil Dead Rise probably had the strongest family dynamic of the franchise. And I think Evil Dead Burn belongs near the top when it comes to the story and the characters. Now, granted, I will say this, that it is not the deepest story, or it doesn't explore all of its themes that it's going for. So don't expect like this top tier story, top tier character work, because it's not that. But for an Evil Dead movie, I think it does belong towards the top in terms of the themes and concepts that it's exploring with its characters. And I will say this has been a general complaint of a lot of people that have watched this movie. They don't care for the characters. I personally liked all the characters in this movie. I think in terms of every single character that showed up on screen, for the most part, I liked all of them. And I think if you go back to every single Evil Dead film, this one is one of the stronger ones with its characters. To me, I enjoyed what they were doing there from a story perspective and the character side of things. But I do realize, and I do want y'all to know that that is something that a lot of people have complained about, are the characters being not memorable in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, those themes surrounding toxic and abusive relationships was interesting to me, although I do think the movie could have explored those ideas a little bit better. They don't feel as fleshed out as they could have been. They feel like they're setting up something meaningful, but they never quite dive as deep as I wanted them to with those themes. But still, for an Evil Dead movie, I thought the story was more than strong enough to keep me invested, especially considering this movie is just about 2 hours long. And honestly, the pacing also impressed me. It's definitely close to being a little too long. I think you could have probably trimmed maybe 10, 15 minutes from the first act and tightened things up a little bit. But for a 2-hour Evil Dead movie, I never found myself checking my watch or getting bored by this. And once everything gets going, it moves at a really nice pace. Now, unfortunately, I do have a couple of criticisms, and these are some pretty big criticisms if you are a huge fan of the Evil Dead franchise. Okay, like these might be things that turn you off of this movie. The biggest one is the ending, and without getting into spoilers, I wasn't crazy about the final battle. And the reason why I'm not crazy about it is the reliance on CGI. This franchise has always been built on incredible practical effects. And while there are still plenty of those here, the climax leans much more heavily on the CGI than I would have liked. There are still some fantastic visuals. One particular sequence involving like red smoke that looked absolutely incredible. But overall, I think the finale of this movie is one of the weaker looking sections of not only this movie, but the entire series. My other issue is something that longtime Evil Dead fans will probably understand, and those are the rules surrounding the Deadites feel a little looser this time around. Like they definitely played with the rules as much as they could. And throughout the 5 previous movies, we've come to understand how these Deadites behave. Here, it sometimes feels like the rules change depending on what a particular scene needs. And that took me out of the movie a little bit. I also wasn't a huge fan of the new vocal direction for the Deadites. I've always loved that playful, raspy personality that they've had throughout the series. And here they lean much more into the deep demonic voices, and I found them harder to understand at times. So I think the sound design or the audio there is not up to par with the rest of the series. Now, I can't explain in great detail why these things bug me so much in this movie without jumping into spoilers, but I think longtime fans will know exactly what I'm talking about once they have seen this movie. And even the post-credit scene, which there are 2, by the way, those post-credit scenes left me with mixed feelings. And one of them introduces an idea that I think raises a lot more questions about the established mythology of the Deadites. And from the people that I've heard talking on the internet that are huge fans of this series, this particular scene is pissing off a lot of long-term fans of the series. So just take that with a grain of salt going into it. It's gonna fuck with some things here, okay? But at the same time, from a horror scene on its own, that post-credit scene was pretty fucking awesome, okay? I'm not gonna lie. But where does Evil Dead Burn rank for me? Well, y'all gonna stay tuned for another episode where I'm going to rank all of the Evil Dead movies from worst to best. And honestly, I'm not ready to say that this is my favorite movie of the franchise, but I will say it is pretty damn close. After watching all 6 films back to back, I realized I consistently enjoy Evil Dead the most when it embraces the horror first and lets that camp support it instead of the other way around. And that's exactly what Evil Dead Burn does. It's brutal, intense, visually ambitious in some areas, and it's packed with memorable set pieces. But the CGI does get a little too heavy handed, which is a huge issue for me. And the fact that they're playing with the rules of the series that we have known since movie number one does irk me a little bit, but not enough to make me hate this movie. And I think visually speaking, in terms of the color palette of this movie, it does feel a little boring in a sense. It's very gray and dark. It doesn't look as cool as some of the other movies that we've gotten, especially Evil Dead 2013 or Evil Dead Rise. But in the end, I love how unapologetically mean this movie is. It's probably the meanest of the series. Guys, don't get things crazy. This is not the most brutal, most mean, most aggressive movie out there. Okay, it's not. But for an Evil Dead movie, it definitely has to be at the top in terms of being brutal and mean. But guys, let me know down in the comments below what you thought about Evil Dead Burn, and go ahead and drop your Evil Dead franchise rankings while you're at it. Hit that like, subscribe button. That's really going to help me grow this channel, and hit that notification bell so you know when the next review drops. But I appreciate y'all joining me for this review series and this review in particular, and I will catch y'all next time on another one. Laters.